Okay, there we go. Okay, you guys have been very patient. Thank you so much for being here to discuss today managing and conserving deep sea ecosystems. I know you had a really big deep sea mining event before this. And so this is going to take it down that deep sea mining conversation down a slightly different angle. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Diva Amen. I'm a Caribbean marine biologist that focuses on trying to understand the poorly known ecosystems of the deep sea and how we are impacting them. I work at this weird confluence of policy and science and communication, and really think we should be engaging a lot more of humankind in the stewardship of the largest realm of this planet, which brings us to our panel. Today, we're going to have an intergenerational conversation. We really, have spanned the ages here. And I think we're going to have a really great conversation, intergenerational conversation on deep sea mining and, how we feel about it, what are potential avenues moving forward. This has been one of the most sensitive and also one of the events where attention has focused the most during this week. We've seen a number of events earlier this week that have had huge numbers of attendees. The hubbub on social media is deafening, thanks to many in the room. And really there is a growing conversation that needs to, really get louder as things go on. I've been to many events this week, but this has been one of the ones that I must say I'm looking forward to the most. And that is in part because of this amazing panel that I'm joined by. So first, she needs no introduction at all, right? But we have Dr. Sylvia Earle, who's the founder of Mission Blue, a National Geographic explorer at large, the founder of Deep Ocean Exploration and Research, and the former chief scientist of NOAA. There is a long, long list. I could continue to go on, but we all know her. I'm pretty convinced she's actually 5 people, given the amount of events she's attended this week. But we're very lucky to have her here with us today to continue this conversation. Next, we have Kaya Lone Fiatot. And Kaya is a senior advisor at Sustainable Oceans and a marine biologist and science communicator with a love for the deep sea and mapping. She's previously worked with international development programs at Grid Arendal, managing environmental impacts of industry at the Norwegian Environment Agency, and now is working for Sustainable Oceans at WWF. Put up your hands. Yeah! Next, we have Daniel Caceres Bartra. Daniel is the SOA Regional Representative for Latin America, Sustainable Ocean Alliance, though I'm sure all of you know that. He's a marine biologist, a PADI dive instructor, advisor for Edward Malaga, the Peruvian congressman and vice president of the Peruvian Climate Change Commission. And finally, last but not least, we have Maria Pena Ermida. Maria has a master's in international and European law from Nova School of Law, where she wrote her master's dissertation actually on the precautionary principle applied to deep sea mining. So particularly topical for today. And she's currently a PhD candidate at Católica Global School of Law and a researcher at Católica Center for Future of Law, where she's studying international obligations and their role in marine governance and resource management, particularly on the high seas. So as you can tell, we've got an immense panel with us today. And really excited to dive into the event. And one last thing to say, thank you to our sponsors today for this event, the Benioff Ocean Initiative, Mission Blue, the Sustainable Ocean Alliance, and the Oxygen Project. And to all of you who are joining us online, thank you. And please do, everyone, this is streaming online, please do share. We would love to get as many people watching as possible. So, should we get going? Okay, so I thought, let's ease in with a question on, I'm sure everyone in the room has an answer to this, but I'm particularly interested in finding out what does the deep ocean mean to you? Why is it important? I think it's a place that's so far removed from most of us. It is hard to see the connection, but clearly all of you do, given your work. So perhaps I could throw it to you, Sylvia, first.
Diva, it's not just what it means to me, it's what it means to everyone, everywhere, all the time. The importance of putting the fate of the deep sea on the balance sheet right now could not be more important. You know, just because we can now get to the deep sea and extract both forms of life as well as the living rocks that are known as manganese nodules doesn't mean we should. In fact, we should exert, as never before, the precautionary principle and recognize the absolute mandate that we have in the 21st century to hold on to, protect, seriously protect the last remaining wild places where humans have minimum impact. I mean, we've really affected all of nature one way or the other. Some places we have not deliberately converted to our purposes. We have not deliberately converted much of the deep ocean to other purposes, whether it's food or mineral extraction or whatever. It's still remarkably intact, considering that there are now 8 billion of us, and that we can walk on the moon, we can send our probes to Mars, and we can go to the deepest part of the sea. And that started literally back in 1960, when 2 guys went to the deepest part of the sea for the first time. 52 years later, James Cameron, better known as a filmmaker, director, artist, but also known as an explorer, a marine scientist in his own right, a fellow explorer at National Geographic, but you know, he went there all by himself in a little submersible that he commissioned to have designed. And then since then, Victor Vescovo has gone in a submersible that he commissioned to be designed to go to full ocean depth. It's not that we haven't had the capacity to go, people have just not, we haven't been willing to invest in what it takes to go there to explore and understand the nature of the deep sea. A few instruments, Japanese Kaiko remotely operated vehicle, went to the deepest part of the ocean, and then it was lost at sea. Woods Hole developed a deep, remotely operated vehicle that explored the deepest places in the ocean for a while, and then it was lost at sea. We're remarkably unprepared to answer questions. What's it really like down there? Who lives there? We have samples, and Diva has been among the few who have spent time in deep diving submersibles to be able to answer the question from little glimpses, little elevator rides down into small areas of the ocean, but we know enough to know that it's full of life, and that every time you go, you see things you did not expect. You're always going to have, when you come back, you can't believe what we just saw. I think when the census of marine life took place from 2000 to 2010, the bottom line about what they discovered and what they were able to catalog, they wanted to know who really lives in the ocean, the census of marine life. Who has lived in the ocean, looking at museum records and whaling logs and other information, museum collections. And then the bottom line is what will be there in the future based on what we can learn. Expeditions over that 10-year period. And I love the comment that was made that the deeper we go, the less we know, but the more new discoveries we find. So what does it mean to us? I think we know enough to know that this is a vital part of what makes Earth, a living system that right now still what functions in our favor. But if we continue to do what we've always done, to turn the living world into products, into things that really undermine their basic functions as our life support system, we're going to increasingly go closer to the edge of irreversible change. We know that we need to save what we can of the systems that work now and restore what we can if we are to have a future, period. Our existence really depends on taking care of our life support system, of nature.
Well, that's certainly a hard act to follow. Anybody else have anything to add there?
I'll add something, although I have to say it's hard speaking after such an amazing speaker with so many amazing points. So for me, my love of the deep sea, and I guess my interest in the deep sea started when I was quite young. I have some amazing parents that have always really been engaging with curiosity and making sure we're curious about the world around us. And I started first I was really curious about space. I think a lot of kids want to be astronauts. And then I started watching some stuff about the deep sea. And I was like, I'm going to be an aquanaut because it's super cool. And the deep sea, the more I learn about it, like you said, Sylvia, the creatures that live there and the things that we are discovering, it just puts me in such awe, and it just gives me such curiosity about this last frontier of wilderness on our planet. And I went on tour with this theater company, actually. As a marine biologist, you don't get to do that a lot. And I had a presentation about kind of deep sea creatures. I met someone from Monterey Bay yesterday. I used some of their videos. It's just so amazing. And you see these creatures that you just never imagined would exist. And for me, the deep sea creatures are really the innovators of the planet. Everything that we think of, they've kind of already done. And it was described to me so well, this idea of if you're floating down in the deep sea, it's not this dark, depressing, dark place with no life. It's like floating around in the starry sky with blinking lights all over you, because all of these animals, a lot of them communicate with light, which is actually the most common communication form on our planet. And so few people know about it. So for me, it's just this curiosity really driving it. And then, of course, after you get curious about something, and then you start to get to know how important it is, and then you want to protect it. And that's really why I started going into marine biology.
Thank you, and thank you for this amazing panel. I would like to share my point of view of what the deep sea is for me. And it will be 3 words. It will be hope, test, and proof. Hope. The reason why I say hope is because I've always wanted to see an ecosystem that has been untouched. I've always read about so many animals that have gone into extinction before I arrived. Fishermen, just in a baseline of 50 years, have said how the ocean has changed. Just in Latin America, when we arrived 12,000 years ago, in 2,000 years, we were able to colonize from North America all the way to South America in 2,000 years. In a couple thousand of years, we were able to take to extinction more than 33 species. And this happened in all the continents. And it's humanity itself, the way we have been able to adapt to ecosystems completely different that we were able to be meant at the beginning. Right before the wheel started, we had already taken into extinction 50% of all big marine mammals that existed on land. So being able to see this baseline, how it's changed in such a small period of time, I know the ocean has been the last barrier because it was a place we couldn't go under and really go deep and find the animals and kill them and disappear them. So this is the last frontier of hope that I have, to be able to go down like Sylvia and eventually be able to see an ecosystem that really has not changed in hundreds or thousands of years. Have that same picture that was there from many years ago. The second word is test. And I see test because I see this deep seabed mining thing as a test for all of us, to see which narrative is going to win, to see which fight is going to win in this. And this is going to be a test for all of us to see how united we are with this big lobby that has so much money and so much interest and has such a big illusion that we need these minerals to be able to exist happily. And the last thing is that it will be proof. It will be proof that we can win in this fight. It will be proof that we can actually do things different, and we can tell everyone that it was us, young people, united with everyone in this narrative, that we can change the world and do things differently.
It is such an honor to be surrounded by people who care so much, who have careers in this, who are pushing for an actual moratorium and doing things within their civil society, meaningful things. And Daniel, like I've said before, I admire you so much for all the work you are putting into this. As you may have understood, I am not a scientist. I am a lawyer. We're usually the bad guys. And my story with deep sea mining and why I value so much the deep sea is exactly because I didn't care before. Studying law of the sea, we see the deep sea as the beginning of law of the sea. It's why it started. It's why Arvid Pardo stood up in 1967 and said, we need to do something about the oceans. We have all these conventions, but they don't account for anything. We need something new. And the deep sea started it. At the time, it was not because of environmental concerns. It was because of equity. It was because radioactive waste was getting dumped in the ocean, and it was because of peace, because we were in a plain Cold War. And being a lawyer, I don't know if you've ever opened a law book. I know I have some colleagues here today. We don't get many pictures. We don't get many diagrams. We don't get many explanations on what things are actually like and down there. Law started as a science that was based on people, relationships between people. And then suddenly, in the 20th century, we needed to discipline our relationships with the environment and with the world that surrounded us. And somehow, lawyers, we got desensitized. And we left the real world behind. And so when I started deep sea mining and the legal framework for the deep sea, I thought, oh my God, what a great activity. This is great. I love this. And then one day, Gonçalo Carvalho, who is there somewhere from Siena, invited me to a conference as I was deciding what I was going to write about in my master's thesis. And he said, you should come. It's about deep sea mining. It was propelled by Siena, Seas at Risk, High Seas Alliance. And the whole morning, I was put in the same room as scientists who presented me with figures, facts, pretty images of the deep sea. You know. And I just said, oh my God, what are we doing? This is a terrible idea. And no one in law is talking about this. And so that's propelled me into this area, and that's basically what's kept my love for law of the sea alive, and that's why I'm focusing so much on resource management beyond national jurisdiction, within the part of the sea that is still a global common. It still belongs to all of us. And we have to treat it as such. We have to treat it as the common parts that we have in our buildings. Planet Earth is our building. We have to take care of the common parts, otherwise we're not going to have them anymore.
So I think I may go down in history as being the first moderator to absolutely lose it on stage at some point. I spent most of those answers trying to desperately not cry. They were each incredible. They were each different. And I think they really did, resonate a lot with me. And I hope, given the differences, really resonate with a lot of you in the room, at least one of them, perhaps all of them. And I'm sure there are many other reasons in the room about why we engage with the deep sea, but this was a pretty great set of them. So you just touched on the common heritage of humankind. And I'm sure many of you in the room know this, but the minerals in areas beyond national jurisdiction are something called the common heritage of humankind. That means that they belong to you, they belong to me, they belong to us, they belong to all future generations. And that means that we all deserve to benefit from them. And yet we have seen at the International Seabed Authority, where the negotiations happen in Kingston, Jamaica, and also here at this conference, everywhere that the International Seabed Authority really engages, we have seen a real lack of participation, a real lack of access, a real lack of inclusion from a variety of stakeholder groups. And given that this is the common heritage of humankind, I think many people see that as being quite problematic. And especially, given that, as many of you again may be aware, there's been this trigger rule. Nauru has triggered this 2-year rule as of June 2021. That means that we are now on a fast track to get those negotiations in place for mining exploitation license to be issued. So we really are running against a clock here. And that is without having proper regulations in place, that is without having science, that is without having participation. So, problematic. And that's why many of us are here, right? And so, why is it important to each of you, given the differences on the panel, the similarities on the panel, given the varied interactions and feelings for the deep sea, given the similarities in that we all deserve to benefit and we all do benefit, why is it important to each of you that there is intergenerational inclusion in ISA processes? And not just intergenerational inclusion, but all inclusion. Can I throw it to Kaya first? Is that okay? I'm sorry.
Oh my God, now you're taking the microphone away from Sylvia Earle. I'll give it back, I promise. All right, so I think this is a great question, and I think youth representation in general is something that's lacking, I would say, a lot of different arenas, not just in the ISA, but I think it's very important because we're discussing young people's futures. A lot of the people that are sitting here making decisions, they're not going to be around when these are actually implemented, so that's very important. And I also wanted to use this opportunity to highlight also Norway's, what Norway is doing right now, because we talk about the ISA and that we don't have a lot of time. The situation in Norway right now is that we have an ongoing process as well to investigate whether or not to do deep seabed mining in our jurisdictional waters. And it's going even faster than what's happening at the International Seabed Authority. And our government is aiming to make a decision this spring of 2023. So I am really concerned with what my country is doing here. I think what we need to base our decision on is a proper scientific background. We need to have knowledge-based decisions for the future, and I think youth are demanding that the decisions we are making for our future needs to be based on the science, needs to be based on the knowledge, and at the moment we do not have the knowledge to make this decision. And this is not a yes or a no to deep seabed mining. This is about taking a pause, stopping to think, gathering the information that we need so that we can actually make an informed decision. And I also wanted to just highlight the paper that Diva and other authors came out with at the beginning of this year, and just give a shout out to that because it was a really useful paper that actually looked at all of the different areas where we need to make a decision and what knowledge base there is right now. And I think this is also, yeah, go Diva. I think this is when I talk to policymakers, when I talk to businesses, when I talk to financial institutions in my country, we need to highlight the blank areas. The deep sea has so many of them. We don't understand what will happen if we actually start mineral activity. So I think intergenerational is very important, but also listening to the scientists is really, really important. Thank you.
Diva, I want to be a little bit disruptive.
Of course.
Because you put this forward as we all own the ocean. No, we don't. No, we don't. We don't. We do have responsibility. We do have the power to destroy. It will depend on what we do or fail to do on our watch right now, early in the 21st century and in the decades immediately thereafter. We have the mighty power to upend the natural systems that keep Earth habitable, the biogeochemistry of the planet that has taken 4.5 billion years to kind of get to a place that's just right for us. It's taken us about 4.5 decades to significantly unravel, not just the land and not just the surface of the ocean, but in my lifetime I've witnessed our increasing access to the sea, the industrial fishing, mining life out of the ocean, clear-cutting life from the sea, affecting the carbon cycle, affecting the oxygen cycle, affecting life on Earth. And we've done it with our eyes open. As you point out, it didn't take long, a few thousand years, to do what Ed Wilson described as consuming the large, the slow, and the tasty animals from the land. The Lewis and Clark expedition across North America early in the 1800s. The goal was to find the animals, skin the animals, sell the fur from the animals. It wasn't, let's protect the animals. It was, how can we monetize wild places and wildlife? Taking birds. You know, we exterminated birds across North America, and some of them were not quite exterminated, but we greatly reduced their numbers until an attitude came about that maybe we need birds for reasons that transcend marketplace excuses for killing birds. Not about food, it was marketplace, feathers and luxury dining. And now we do much the same in the ocean. You know, we're turning our attention now with technologies that did not exist 200 or 100, or in some cases even 50 years ago. We're getting better and better about taking, destroying, extracting, demolishing the wild everywhere. I mean, years ago, it occurred to me, looking at the devastation that our species has inflicted on the land to foster our prosperity, turning nature into whatever it is that makes us prosper, that somehow we've gotten away with it because we hadn't yet damaged the ocean to the same degree that we have the land. We can't say that anymore. We're right on the edge. We have the power to convert whatever it is that we find in the ocean into products. We also have the power of restraint. Just because we can get to the deep sea and mine the deep sea doesn't mean that we should, just because it's there, just because we can. In fact, this is the first time in all of human history we have been able to see as clearly as we now can what makes Earth habitable. How did we get here? How do we get the oxygen in the atmosphere? What is air anyway? Where does water come from? I mean, kids now can see what I did not know, no one could know when I was a kid. I mean, you have the mighty superpowers of knowing what could not be known before. And that means you have the authority to say we can't continue to destroy the very systems that make Earth habitable. We've done a good job of contaminating the air, the water everywhere, and of destroying the natural fabric of life that makes our life possible. But we don't have to go any further now that we know. Why should we? Just say no. I mean, say yes to nature, say yes to life, say yes, we understand. And we're not going to be the next generation of destroyers. We're going to be, we have the obligation now, the opportunity to heal the harm and go forward with respect for nature because we want to live.
So I think the question in regards to the importance of intergeneration, I think it's reflected right in this summit, in the Ocean Summit. And first of all, on regards to this subject, I think the best person that has given me an example of that is a really good friend, and it's Congressman Ed Malaga over here, and I want to give a shout out to him. I think sometimes we have to convince people, older people, what we're worth as young. Sometimes it feels really tough trying to convince them that we have something unique to bring to the table. And it feels really, you feel appreciated when you see people that are older than you with more experience value you and trust you in regards to that. So I think the important message that I will give to older people is include young people, always. But also, this is a message to all young people. We need to also include older people in our discussions. Sometimes we exclude older people, and they know stuff, they don't know a lot of stuff that we know right now. So I think it's very important that we have the capacity to speak, to dialogate, to have empathy with them also. They don't know a lot of stuff, and it's not their fault. Many of you, if you would have talked to many people that are older, like if you would have talked to many people like us 10 years ago about deep sea bed mining, we probably would not have been able to give a good answer. Probably a position would have been completely different also. And it was thanks to people that have included us, have talked to us, have shared the story, that we're able to be here united for a common purpose. It takes time, and we have to be patient with that. And that's something also that Ed taught me. We have to be able to speak with everyone and have to understand that sometimes we're going to have to get to see what they're interested in, have to be able to have patience and not go in an aggressive thing. If we're all here, we're already part of this fight. We're already part of the Ocean Conference. And I think we have to also include older people in this discussion. I think something else that's important is, a lot of people have asked me, do you think this conference is really worth it? What do you think we can do to make it different? And I think there will be two things that I would suggest that we do to promote the next Ocean Conferences. First of all, I think we have to make sure that the next years, all the national delegations include young people in there. As a regional representative, I'm currently part of the Peruvian delegation, and I'm the only young person in the Peruvian delegation currently. But as a regional representative, I send out letters to all the ministers of the presidents where we have hubs in SOA. We send out letters saying, we have this president of SOA that really wants to be part of your delegation. And not everyone answer, but for example, we had the minister in Mexico answer and say, thank you for your recommendation. And they have included Valeria Magaña as a young person in their delegation. So I think this is what we have to do. We have to make sure next year that we send out letters to all the ministers saying, we have these young people, please recommend them, please, so they can be part of them. And the second thing also, this is my 5th Ocean Conference. I've been to our ocean in DC, I've been to our ocean in Malta, in Norway, in Indonesia, and this is my first UN conference. And I've never had parliament members as part of the Peruvian delegation. And inviting Ed, inviting Haiti, and they were able to come here. And just seeing them there and seeing how much legislative work is necessary to do has been amazing in that. If our executive power, that's mostly in this conference, is not taking the reins, not taking the wheel to lead this, let's bring our legislative power. That's our democratic tool to be over here. So let's also promote, send out letters, let's talk to our congressmen and tell them to assist to the next conference. So those are the two suggestions that I will give. Let's send out letters to our ministers to promote young inclusion, send out names to them. The Ministry of Exterior Relations, those are the ones that give the accreditations to the delegation. And second of all, attend the parliament members and invite them to be part of the fishing delegations. I think that's how we're going to be able to make sure the next UN conference is much more effective. Thank you.
I would actually like to, surprisingly, add the legal aspect to this. You mentioned the principle of common heritage of humankind. It wasn't always called common heritage of humankind. It was called common heritage of mankind because it was born in the 20th century. Before it was applied to the deep sea, it was actually applied to celestial bodies. And it took one person, Ambassador Arvid Pardo from Malta, to say we should apply this to the deep sea as well. And so that principle was included in the UN Convention for Law of the Sea, which is one of the most comprehensive legal instruments that we have in international law. And what principles do is they're meant to give us direction in our legislative action. And what this principle said, common heritage of mankind at the time, what did they say? What does this mean, common heritage, mankind? It meant that no country, no state could appropriate the resources that were in the deep sea. They should be used for peaceful purposes. They should benefit for all mankind. And there should be a guardian of these resources, which was what the ISA is meant to be. But law cannot be a fossil. It cannot be fossilized. It cannot stop in time, especially international law, because as we've seen from this convention, it is so difficult to change. And so what do? We give it updates. And that's basically what has happened with the principle of common heritage of mankind. It has received 3 updates. The first, it went from common heritage of mankind to common heritage of humankind, which has big implications when it comes to civil rights and human rights. Then we had another update. What are these resources? What resources? In the 60s, it was rocks. It was minerals. Because we thought that the deep sea was a completely barren area. You'll see papers from that time. And it was always looking at the bottom of the ocean as with an extractive view. But in the meantime, we go to 2022, and we know this is not the case. And so more and more you have legal scholars saying that these resources, the ISA, should not only be the guardian, and I'm emphasizing the word guardian, of mineral resources, it should also be the guardian of all the life that is in those areas. And this brings me to update 3, because I know I'm looking at very concerned faces now. Update 3 is, what does humankind mean? Humankind in the 60s, and we're at plain Cold War, and we're before many movements of independence, many new countries entering the UN. And there is a concern by Arvid Pardo, is that at this point we have 20, 30 states in the world which will be able to actually benefit from all of these resources, at the time just mineral. And is this okay? Is this fair? If we call it common heritage of mankind, is it fair that only 20, 30 states are able to benefit? No. And so this was the point. These resources should be benefiting developed states as well as developing states. And many mechanisms were made then altered by the 1994 agreement, but this was the starting point. Flash forward 2022, and we have an added dimension. Because at the time the UN Convention on Law of the Sea was negotiated, there was no concern with sustainable development. We didn't worry about sustainability. Everything lasted forever, so it was okay to just take and take and take. Flash forward to 1992, we know this is not true. And scientific discoveries were made, and we're actually depleting our ozone layer. We are depleting our resources. And so a new layer had to be added to the principle of common heritage of mankind, humankind. Is that it should benefit, these resources should benefit not only developed and developing states at the time, not only present generations, but future generations. All exploration or not exploration should be done with the view that future generations must also take part. And this does not just mean resources. This benefit, it can be cultural. It can be biological. It can be studying those beings. It can be scientific. It doesn't have to be economic. So when we have principles, when we have law, we have to be very careful as policymakers, as lawyers, to adapt the law to the society we live in. We cannot stay stuck in the 60s. We need to flash forward to the 21st century. And this has to be done.
So this clearly isn't just a cross-generational issue. This isn't just a cross-sectoral issue. This is a humankind issue, right? And we really do need all of it engaged. You know, I've been attending the ISA negotiations in Jamaica since 2017, and I have never seen anyone below 26 there. And Daniel gave a shout out that we should be having youth on our delegations here at the UN Ocean Conference, but that is the exact same thing at the ISA. We need to get youth in the room there, and it's not just youth. We need to get Indigenous leaders in the room there. We need to get more NGOs in the room there. We need as much participation as possible there. And we have seen huge strides being made by young people, by less young people. And we really, even though that was a less hopeful segment, I think there is so much being done despite the lack of engagement at the International Seabed Authorities by many different generations, and particularly the youth and other underrepresented groups. We still see huge progress being made by each of those groups outside of the ISA. They are demanding to come in various different ways, and I think it would be really wonderful if we spent the next short time discussing some of the ways in which you guys have really worked towards, you know, changing the landscape, changing the seascape in terms of deep seabed mining. So given how much collective effort there is just on this panel towards really changing that status quo and really protecting the deep sea, conserving the deep sea, from policy to science to community engagement, we'd love to hear more about each of those efforts. So would anybody like to go first? Yeah?
Yeah, I can go. So I started semi-recently in a new job in October in Worldwide Fund for Nature in Norway, and I have the pleasure of leading our team that works on the moratorium for seabed mining. And I'm a marine biologist as a background, but I think we all can understand that marine biology only is not the only perspective when it comes to this. So I have an interdisciplinary team from finance, from business, from policy, from communications, and we work together on this issue. And for me, one of the most important parts is actually going into dialogue. So I spend a lot of my time talking to the business community, talking to the finance community. I really think we should not underestimate the power of the finance and business community when it comes to this question. There's a lot of talk about, you know, environmental guidelines and nature criteria. We need to bring also this into the deep sea mining discussion. And I think for me, that's been like one of the greatest pleasure is to go into dialogue with all the stakeholders, not just people that necessarily agree on my position, but also the people that are on the other side, and try to understand each other. And I think that's brought some very interesting dialogues coming forward. So I think for my side, I think one of the most important aspects of my work is exactly that, bringing people together in the same room, having like different stakeholders from all different groups go into actually a global discussion. And then of course, I think, and I believe from the finance perspective, from the business perspective, just like putting the environmental aspects out of it and purely looking at the business model, deep sea mining is not even sustainable from like a financial and business perspective. So I have no idea why we're going so far into it. And a lot of the people I talk to from these communities have never heard about it, and they're really enlightened to go into these discussions. So I would really encourage everyone to do that as well. And of course also have intercultural discussions, which I think the youth forum that we had before the conference, where I got to meet, among others, these great guys and a lot of other youth from all around the globe, it's also really important to understand the different perspective from different cultures. So I think that's kind of my most important part of my work, is bringing people together, and then of course fighting for this moratorium so we have enough time to actually get the knowledge we need.
So we still are focusing on people. When you think about the responsibility, the moral responsibility that we have, not just to the fate of humankind, but the fate of life on Earth. Who speaks for the whales? Who speaks for the deep sea creatures who don't yet have names in our way of defining them? But they're out there, they're down there. They're making our existence possible, and their fate is in our hands. We talk about intergenerational representation. We talk about the importance of being representative, but who's speaking for the rest of life on Earth? I mean, we have to think about, from a very human standpoint, the astronauts, when they launched into space, where you can't breathe the air, there is no air. They had to do everything they could to learn about their life support system that they took with them. And then they had to do everything they could to take care of it. Here we are on Earth. Our life support system is in trouble. It's declining. We can measure it insofar as we can measure. A lot of things we can't. What's happening as a consequence of changing the chemistry of the ocean, of acidifying the ocean? What's happening as a consequence of deoxygenating the ocean through our actions? It's happening. What's happening because of what is, in a nerdy term, called defaunation of the ocean, of taking life out of the ocean on an industrial scale, changing the chemistry of the ocean, changing our life support system from a very human standpoint. But what if the whales made the rules? What if, in terms of discussing our future, we don't even think about their future? But we should, we must. It's our moral responsibility to think that this is not just about, oh, here's Earth, our natural, quote, resources for us to use for our benefit. Okay, but if you can't breathe, what difference does it make how much money you've acquired? I mean, we need to think differently. Deep sea mining really puts in the crosshairs the ethical responsibility we have as never before, because we did not know. I heard Elliot Richardson, who was on the US delegation to try to frame the law of the sea back in the 1960s and 70s. He said, not to worry about the deep sea, there's nothing down there but green slime. I wanted to say, look, it's probably not green. Manganese nodules, I was in on the scientists who were helping to evaluate on behalf of Lockheed in the 1981, that they thought just sea cucumbers down there, who cares about them? They put hundreds of millions of dollars trying to figure out what is it like down there, where are the concentrations of manganese nodules, and will anybody object? When they came back and said there's nothing there, you hear that today.
Still doing that, I was about to say, still happening.
Yeah, it is. That's the marketing ploy. There's nothing down there, no harm will be done. We might as well go pluck them gently, delicately from the seafloor. Harvest as if they're a crop that will grow back next year. Or we'll take what we want and we'll put the rest back into the deep sea. Great, let's bulldoze New York City. And we'll take out the taxi cabs and we'll throw everything back down in a heap. Anyway, there is so much on the line right now that everyone needs to be in on this. Everyone. Because, like it or not, our species will continue to devastate the natural systems to the point where our existence will no longer be possible. We're on a track to do that. And we can think selfishly about our future, but we should also recognize that what right do we have now or ever to determine the fate of all of the rest of life on Earth? We're at that point where we'll either move from the edge of the cliff, tipping points, beyond the point of no return, and turn turn from destruction, move to care and healing. We can't afford to risk our life support system anymore. We need to restore the forests. We need to restore wild rivers. We need to restore, to the extent that we can, of the remaining fabric of life. We cannot afford to tear up more of these ancient systems because we can, and because we can market small elements in the short term. We just should be caught with this awareness that we just can't go there. We don't have the right to do this. And we have laws, but we need to respect the laws of nature first and foremost.
Thank you so much for that. I try. In terms of collective action, actually I'm going to take the opportunity, me and Kaya at the Youth Policy Advisory Council from Sustainable Ocean Alliance, we have been developing policy brief on deep sea mining, and we need your help. If you're under 35? Yeah, if you're under 35. Because we need to know exactly what everyone thinks about this. We found a way of involving the youth, of giving you a voice. And for that, we just need you. This is 3 minutes tops. It's literally just, did you know about deep sea mining at all? Did you know what it does, what it may do, what it may not? Do you know what ISA is? And in the end, how do you feel about it? I can tell you actually about an experience I had yesterday morning right here in this room, where we were learning about deep sea mining, a group of 20 people or so, and we were doing a bunch of exercises, some discussion. I don't know if you've ever done like drama games. I was a drama kid, I was a theater kid, and I did those a lot. And there is one where they tell you, you basically give the answers with your body. And this was basically, if you take a step forward, you're saying yes. If you're taking a step back, you're saying no. And they asked us a bunch of questions about deep sea mining. And the final question, it starts getting very automatic. Last question was, do you think we should mine? No one moved. No one knew. No one knows enough. No one wants to take that decision. And this is a part. And this is why we need to do this. We need to educate ourselves in order to have a firm position, in order to have serious dialogue about this. And so we need the youth's perspective. And this is what this is all about, basically. And this is why we're writing a youth policy paper on this. Because we need your support, we need your opinions. Even if you don't know, for us, that's good. It's a good thing that you don't know, because it shows us that this is not getting talked about enough, and we need to talk about it more. And yeah, so please, QR code. It's very easy. I think it's being shown on the live stream as well. It's going to be there for a while, so please take the chance, if you're watching under 35, to fill that out.
So first, I want to answer Sylvia's question when she said, "Who speaks for the whales? Who speaks for the animals?" That's a question that I always ask myself. The democratic process. Trees don't vote, whales don't vote, animals don't vote, and how can we convince a majority of the people to vote for people that want to focus directly on the environment? And so yeah, but I hope that we can build also a policy model, a political model that can really eventually include all of that. In our constitutions, Ecuador has a constitution where it gives the rights to the people, to the environment, and Bolivia has a Pachamama in there. And I really hope that we are the ones that can eventually give the voice to all those other living creatures, and we're not so anthropocentristic as we currently are. So in regards to the question, Diva, of what we have done, when I first heard about deep seabed mining, it was mainly an issue that was talked about small island developing countries, nations, in Africa over there, and I saw that in Latin America there was actually no discussion on the matter. And then going back to Peru, I feel like my country, my region should be supporting and should be making momentum and a movement on that. But it was a hard and difficult question because Peru is such a big mining country, a country that depends so much on the mining industry, that we were afraid if we talked about deep seabed mining, instead of saying, oh, let's take care of it, they'll be like, wow, there's so much minerals over there. That's a good thing. So that was something that was very worrisome in there. When I got back after hearing about this issue on deep seabed mining, it was already a part of political campaigning in Peru. And I was working closely with a political party back then. And what we wanted to do, we wanted to include the SDG 14 in the government plan of action. It ended up being the best plan of action on ocean on all the other political parties. And we eventually got the presidential candidate in that moment to become the first presidential candidate in the Southern Hemisphere to announce an executive priority in deep seabed mining at that moment. And well, we didn't win the election, but then we continued to do that. And many people usually ask me, it's like, are you not tired of repeating the same message in that? It's like, or people, when I go to them, they're like, oh, I've already talked so much about this. But I tell everyone, every young person, it's like, we have to keep on repeating this. We have to keep on repeating the message to everyone that we talked about until we get into power in there. Because that's what we have to aim. We have to aim to eventually get into power to change these things that we're going to be doing. That's where I met Ed at COP and talked to him about deep seabed mining. He said, let's do it. Let's do this bill. Let's go back to Peru and let's become the first country to write a deep seabed mining moratorium in the region. It was written. We included so many people. YPAC was a huge part of it. And we did. We had proposed the first deep seabed mining moratorium in Latin America, which is something that eventually we hope will help create the momentum also in the discussion in the region that we need. To tell everyone in the Southern Hemisphere, to tell all the other countries, you guys are not alone in this. And this is mainly what we want. We don't know yet if it will pass through commissions. We don't know yet if it will be approved in Congress. So we have to celebrate and just share the story that we have a bill on there that should be the big celebratory thing, because if we can do that, if we can move it in press, if we can get people to talk about this, we can help other countries join us, and eventually some of them will reach the moratorium on them. And then we can aim at the ISA also too, from the legislative power.
So you guys are amazing. And it's not like you don't do enough already, but I feel like there's something else that you could do and we could potentially help to facilitate. Can we do this panel at the ISA? I think this would just be an incredible side event. I think the delegates, many of the delegates, many of the decision makers in that room would never have heard these perspectives, and that is what we need to change at the ISA. One of the many things we need to change at the ISA. You guys, you also have tasks as well. If you haven't done it already, please do access the survey, fill it out. And also, as we've already heard from Daniel and others, communicate. There is a huge push for a moratorium now. There are many different stakeholder groups supporting this. We have had over 600 scientists sign a statement in support of that. We have had numerous businesses, Google, huge car manufacturers like BMW and Volvo. We have had battery makers come forward. We have had a number of corporate entities step forward in support of that moratorium. And then just this week, and the few weeks prior, we have seen states step forward. And that's really a game changer. We saw Palau earlier this week. Many congrats to those in the room who facilitated that. And there were rumblings of other states, Tuvalu, Fiji, Samoa. And also we saw Chile submit a 15-year moratorium request at the UN. So things are rumbling on. And of course we can't forget all of the work that the civil society organizations have done to really get this conversation out there, including many of you in the room. So a huge round of applause to everyone who has contributed. So I think we're going to turn it over now to the audience for questions. We have got a good 15 minutes for questions, so we can take a good few. I saw a hand go up well early. Do we have more than one mic, or I can run around, or you can come up? Please introduce yourself before you ask your question.
Do I have to ask a question, or can I just?
Oh.
Can I just give an update on what you had just said, Diva? Kia ora tātou. My name's Phil McCabe. I'm the Pacific Regional Lead on Deep Sea Mining for the Deep Sea Conservation Coalition. I'm a soccer player. I played soccer for like 35 years. I don't anymore. I'm a surfer now. But it's very rare in those 35 years to have a team, doesn't matter which way you're looking or if you're flicking it this way or that, where you have the confidence in the people around you that they'll do what they do best and they'll deliver. And I've felt that with the DSCC team as we've been working virtually over the last 2 years, and it's just been amplified just like massively. You guys up here in the front, Katja, we were talking this morning, I was like, sorry, what's your name? And then I'm walking here and she's just like throwing it at you, like she's got it, she's gonna do the job, right? All you guys, that's what I'm seeing, right? And so just before this is only, I was at the launch on Monday night, part of the pulling together of that with an amazing team of people. And the beautiful Pacific Blue Line event on Tuesday, for me, that provided the moral backbone to what we're all standing for. We had regional perspectives from the region that will feel the impacts most intimately, and the political call from the leaders from the Pacific, the way I view that, is an expression of their cultural obligation to preserve and protect for future generations. That's an expression of their obligation. And I call on the rest of the states to fall in. I call on Aotearoa New Zealand, Australia, as the closest relations. You know, it's whanaunga. You've probably all seen Debbie Ngare-Wapaka walking around. She's family with the Pacific region as an Indigenous person. They've put a call out to the rest of the world. Sorry, Diva, I'm probably going on too long. I'm going to wrap. So countries listen and fall in behind and support, please. Last thing, I've just met with Palau talking about carrying forward how they grow the alliance going forward. There's dialogue going. It's moving. And all of you, thank you. Keep doing your work. Push, 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 push every single way you can. Thank you.
Okay, I can see people wildly waving, giving me evils. Thank you, Phil. So first, I'm going to give it over to our honourable MP, right? Yes?
Yes, you can just call me Ed, please. I've been a politician for 10 months now, and I want to speak about science now. I've been a scientist for 30 years, so I'm really new to these shoes. And I became a politician because of youth, because I saw a young kid got shot by the police at a violent demonstration in Peru. And I got into this topic, oceans and forests as well, because of the COP26 and because I'm a scientist. And the point I want to raise today is that we keep hearing the word science, scientists, scientific studies, the moratorium, yes, to do research, but we don't get to see the research. We don't get to see much of that research. And as a scientist, as a professor, we always asked, where is the data? What is the data? What are we saying when we say, yes, the biodiversity, 40 years of deep seabed research, and we don't have a repository, we don't have a database where every citizen can look up and say, well, these are the species that are being endangered. What's the chemistry of the water? What are the temperatures? Some things are moving along. But if we are going to use science to base our policies upon worldwide, we need to see the science. And I want to ask any of you if you can comment on what we can do to promote science being more transparent and more exposed to the public. And just to close, there is maybe one suggestion that we could consider having some sort of IPCC panel, you know, like an IPDS in this case, to report constantly, yearly, at every big meeting about what has been found and what can be actually decided based on that research. So thanks a lot, Diva. Thank you all.
So thank you so much for that question. I think it's a very, very important question. I did my master's on marine data and modeling, so trying to collate a lot of the data that's around there. And first of all, it's super fragmented, hey? Like there's no one database where you can collect it all, but also having a database where you just see points or things, it's not really a visual, you don't really understand what the data means. So I think we really need to make sure that we take the scientific data and we translate it, because it's kind of its own language, into something that's understanding for everyone else. So for instance, maps, visual maps that actually display data and impact is a really good way to do this, I think. And we also need a lot of funding, not only just to go to the research, but also to go to research communication and science communication that's understandable. Thank you.
I'm not meant to answer questions, but I'll also help a bit. So I think some people may be aware in the room, the ISA does have a database where they have been, apparently, putting those data points from 40 years of scientific research that we hear about all the time from the ISA Secretariat. I was part of a team of several tens of scientists that worked on an analysis of their regional environmental management plan for the Clarion-Clipperton Zone a couple of years ago, and we tried to get data out of that database to inform that assessment, and we could not get one usable data point out of the hundreds of thousands of data points that we get told exist in it. So it currently is not fit for purpose. The data is not quality assessed and quality controlled. You do not know the methods which were used to gather those data points, and it is deeply problematic. It means that the larger scientific community does not have access to that data, and so cannot do regional assessments, cannot independently verify any of the science that's been done. And also, it can't be used for management, right? So we're not able to take that data, analyze it, convert it into information, and then convert it into knowledge that can be used by society. So it's deeply problematic, and it just doesn't exist right now, even though we hear again and again and again that it does. And one more thing is that the argument that a moratorium is anti-science, which we hear about again and again and again, is absolutely not true. The moratorium will allow, that is a disingenuous argument used by those who want to mine to put the moratorium down. A moratorium will allow more science to be done, more independent science to be done, more science that is not funded by deep sea mining companies that never makes it to the light of day. And little secret, I used to work for one via the University of Hawaii, and I can tell you that's what happens. And so this moratorium will really allow that to move forward in a way in which all of humankind can benefit. And so do not believe that a moratorium is anti-science, though I'm pretty sure everyone in the room knows that. Okay, more, do you want? Sorry, another deep sea scientist.
It's just going on in the interactive dialogues, which is on knowledge, scientific knowledge. So, oh, sorry. I'm Anna Metaxas. I am here representing the Deep Ocean Stewards Initiative, and I work in the deep sea. So Lisa Levin, who's one of our members of the executive, is actually in the interactive dialogue on scientific knowledge. And there was a quote there of Vladimir Ryabinin that basically says that although the ocean is 70% of the planet, only 1.7% of science funding investment is actually done for the ocean.
So, a lot more work to do. You've had your hand up for a very long time. Come up and ask your question. I'm hoping it's a question, not a comment.
To be honest, it's a little bit of a comment, but it's also it's also just to activate all of us. My name is Anna. I founded my own law firm, Ocean Vision Legal. So I'm a colleague. And we have heard a lot about the common heritage of mankind or humankind. There are also other ancient anthropogenic principles in law out there. For example, the freedom of the high seas, which basically says you can go out there and do whatever you want, except sometimes when it's not allowed. It's these principles that led us into this era of the Anthropocene. And if we want to change it, thank you, Sylvia, we have to recognize it's not the common heritage of mankind or humankind. It's common heritage, but of the nature. It does not belong to us. So don't touch it. And that's what we need. So if you want to follow me, I'm looking for allies who are also sick to follow these principles. And yes, I agree. Laws take a long time to change. Do you know how long how old the freedom of high seas is? More than 400 years. Do we really want to let these principles dictate our lives? Let's at least try. Let's go out there and try to change the laws and speak up and change these principles, because that's not what we need anymore. So let's join our forces and ally together, please, and do something about it, and not just accept the laws because they are 400 years old.
And that's a quick moment for a plug. This week there have been some really progressive and fascinating conversations around the right of the ocean, the rights of the ocean. Many of you in the room may have been involved in those. If that is something that many of you would like to continue talking about, please put your hands up. I think there are many in the room who are interested in that conversation and really progressing not just rights for humans, but also rights for nature and beyond. Nancy.
Can I come there? So my name is Nancy Raba, and I'm a marine scientist from Tanzania. And just today, just seeing the panel, it made me flash back some months ago when I sat in an interview for a job, and I was asked who inspires you in the marine space, and I said Dr. Sylvia L. And today I have a chance to meet her, so I'm really honored to see you finally. So my question is that I'm coming from a developing country, and as these discussions go on of the deep sea ecosystem, it makes me reflect of how much is the deep sea ecosystem really accessible, especially for the young people like me who are marine scientists who have only discovered the ocean last year. For the very first time, I got to dive only last year in April in a fellowship where I was trained up to be a dive master. But there is about 90% of young people from developing countries who are marine scientists, but they have never experienced life below water. So my question is, if we are to move and to be able to share of the problems that are happening in the deep sea ecosystem, we as stakeholders, what are we really doing to make sure that we are moving together as one? We are moving together, making sure that the access to the ocean does not remain to the few. I'm not sure if I've made my question clear, but yes, but I think I'm asking this on behalf of all the marine scientists who probably have the privilege of getting to see the ocean as often as they should, so as they can have that concrete voice to want to protect it. Because I highly believe that you can't commit to protect what you have never seen. So how are we making access to other marine scientists like myself who are coming from developing countries? Thank you.
So thank you so much, Nancy. And also, I just want to give a shout out to this also young ocean leader that was with us this weekend. She does amazing work. I think this is such an important issue, and I probably will not have the whole answer, so any ideas is great. But I first discovered the deep sea in biology not through diving, because I'm not a technical diver, so I can't go that deep. But through actually live streams from amazing scientists that do these remotely operated vehicle dives, and they comment on it. So if you haven't checked out, like Nautilus Live, Monterey Bay Aquarium also has. I had the honor of meeting someone from Monterey Bay Aquarium yesterday, and I almost cried. these things are accessible, and that's also the power of the internet, and also something the youth, I think, are using a lot, like spreading these videos, getting to discover it together, and also scientists like expressing the joy and curiosity here. And then I also think it's really up to developed nations to be able to share in prosperity. This is the ocean for everyone. That means we also need to make it available. So I want to give a comment to Kjell Inge Røkke from Aker, who just was named this UN Ocean Decade Special thing. He's a Norwegian, comes from the private sector. I would like him to really engage in exactly this topic. How do we get developing nations involved? And also to make sure that we have the knowledge to make knowledge-based decisions, and that knowledge is available to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that question. At the Youth Forum, where we met, I also met a scientist from Portugal, and she's working at the University of Salerno, and she is working in Cape Verde in mapping the seafloor. And she turned to me, she's like, "Oh my God, you're a lawyer. I need to talk to a lawyer." I'm like, "Oh dear." And she's like, "I'm a scientist. We need time to make science. We need time. We don't know. There's so much we don't know." And I said, "I know. That's why moratorium is important." And I think the moratorium here can come into play. Because it's like you were saying, Diva, the more time we have to study it, the more time we have to make all the knowledge available to all those who need that knowledge. Because in countries, in continents like Latin America, your continental shelves, Africa, continental shelves, here in Portugal, many interesting points that are getting noticed by many people. And so we need to empower the people who are in those countries to have the knowledge, to be educated, and to be a part of the conversation. And we can only do that through data, through scientific investigation, through funding, and study and time. We need, the moratorium is not just something that is being called by the youth, by NGOs. It's something that humanity needs. And I have Sylvia Earle here next to me. And I know you're very averse to thinking about us as humans, but I want to see the moratorium as us recognizing, as us being humble and recognizing our own limitations. People were sitting down for the UN Convention on Law of the Sea for 15 years. It started in the 60s. The convention was only adopted in the 80s, and then it only entered into force into 94. People took their sweet time. And it's okay to take time, to think, to stop and think about what we're doing. And that's what we want with the moratorium. It's time.
So in Peru, currently we only have one research center of marine science. It's called IMARPE, it's the Institute of the Sea, and that it belongs to the Ministry of Production. So in Peru, we know so much about fisheries, but we have so little information about conservation. We have so little information in regards to biodiversity. I mean, and because in Peru, you have to have the information first and then do the legislation. The animals that are most threatened don't even have any type of legislation on them. So we're letting people fish animals that probably their populations have diminished and are probably on the point of extinction. While Colombia and Ecuador, for example, have a period where they don't get lobsters out. In Peru, you can fish lobster at any period of time because we don't know the period of reproduction. That means we can let anyone fish at any moment. And in regards to this, we think that in Peru, the science knowledge it's very important, specifically in the ocean. There's only one university in the whole country that has marine biology. The rest of them, but there's so many careers that have fishing engineering in there. In the bill that were introduced in Congress with Ed came up with the idea of every 2 years having an assessment done of all the investigation that's been done in Peru, because something that we do not want is that after 10 years, we're like, okay, where's the science? And they'll be like, oh, we didn't do any of the science actually. So we think by putting every 2 years, let's do an assessment on this, it can actually promote the government to start in the research center, put a deep sea laboratory, promote the university also to have a deep sea laboratory, and we can also help get funding internationally to promote deep sea science in our country via this moratorium. So I think the moratorium is a great opportunity to promote science in there. And just like a last comment that I would like to make is we're gonna need help from everyone in lobbying in our Peruvian Congress. We're gonna need a lot of help from you guys, because if the pressure comes from outside, we can probably get this bill all the way finished and we can get it approved in Congress.
Okay. We are nearly out. I mean, we're definitely out of time, but we started a little late, right? So it's fine. I saw one more question. That will be the last question, and then we'll wrap up.
Hello, everyone. I don't actually have a question. I just want to speak for the scientists. I'm a marine researcher, a deep sea biologist at the University of the Azores, and I've been involved in doing research to assess the impact of deep sea mining on deep sea organisms. And actually just this week, well, there was a news report that just came out yesterday on the dispersion of plumes that can be generated by deep sea mining in areas of interest for mining in the Azores region, the Mid-Atlantic Ridge in the Azores region, and that can disperse for 150 kilometers and can overlap with fishing grounds, and also hotspots of biodiversity, such as cold water corals. And we have been engaged in, for example, in many research projects, for example, iAtlantic, which we had a session here at this conference, that presents results of experimental studies that test the effect of mining particles that are extracted from hydrothermal vents on marine organisms. And we are actually trying to make it public. We want science to be transparent, that everyone knows what we have been finding out. So we'll keep engaging on that effort. And of course, I will connect with Diva and others to make it more available to the society overall.
Okay. So let's bring this to a close. If you'd like to find out more about the push for a moratorium, please do go on Sustainable Ocean Alliance's website, the Deep Sea Conservation Coalition's website, WWF's website. There are many great stakeholders already involved in this. The Oxygen Project, I should have said. Also, Pang and Dawn and the Pacific Blue Line and Pacific Parliamentarians. No, is it Pacific Parliamentarians or just Pacific Parliamentarians? There are a number of great stakeholders working in this room. Please do and find out more information. And then when you find out more information, go and shout about it. Tell 10 people. And speaking of shouting, though I don't know if they'll actually be shouting, maybe. People might get overwhelmed. There's, at 1:30 today, so in 25 minutes, there's going to be an artivism event. Art and activism combined. Up by the Altice Arena. Where? Jardin de Musica. I probably said that really wrong, but I hope you know where I mean. And one last thing just to say thank you for joining in the room. Thank you for joining online. Please do continue to spread the word. A huge thanks to the sponsors of this event. A huge thanks to the organizing team of this event. And of course, a huge thanks to our incredible panel today. Thank you all. If you have more questions, come up, panel's here. Sure, they'd love to hear them.